welcome to Devlog number 13. Today, I'm going to answer the burning question once more to everyone that's asking why I'm using the Blender game engine, and I'm going to show an example. So I am fighting for a unified workflow, and in a world where everyone's running in the opposite direction and they're kind of jumping to all sorts of different game engines and tools, I'm fighting for a single workflow for artists to make game development not just the development world for developers, but also for 3D artists like myself. And in a world like this, it's very difficult to justify a project like this. So thank you to my patrons, who are literally the best people in the world, who I think understand the future, which is that projects will become a place that people want to occupy rather than they're being forced to occupy. So the best people in the world, their name up again in lights one more time. I'd like to thank them all. One more time. Okay, one more time. Yep, that's them. So thank you to my patrons for supporting the project. And now I'm going to show an example of what a unified workflow is and why I'm using the Blender game engine. So unified workflow sounds like something that some sort of double talk that a corporate douchebag would say, like, oh boy, we're excited about the unified workflow we're having with our partners. That just sounds like something that's made up, but it's a real thing, and it's, in my case, a one-stop solution for creating a game. And here you can see the static build of my game. So if I actually press P and run the game in the Blender game engine, there it is. My game's running. So this is the open world, and I'm testing it. This is also kind of a static build, so it's got higher resolution textures. But right now, I'm coming off the success of making the AI work in my game, and now I'm loading in the monster. So here's the monster. There she is. So this is the vampire. Right now, you can see her hair is animating rather slow, but I can tweak these. I can tweak these things live. So let's do a really quick tweak. So I'm going to show an example of what a unified workflow is. There's a motion. Suppose I want even more exaggerated up and down motion. Quite literally, I just jump over to the Blender file that's being accessed, and I'm going to access the bone that controls that portion of the animation, and I'm going to exaggerate it. So maybe I want her to go down a little bit further. See, she's going to go down further. So now we have even more exaggerated motion. Let's see what that works. So I click save, and now I jump back over to my open world, and I simply test. So it loads up the world, and now I'm going to load in the monster. There's a quick freeze, and there she is. And now you can see she's going up and down even more. So I can use my new crouch. Oh, look at that. Great. So that looks very organic, and it looks a little bit more game-like. This is what Unified is. If I was using another game engine, let's say we're using Unity or Unreal, I'd have to use my 3D creation suite like Blender, Maya, Autodesk, and I would need to, 3D Studio Max, and I would need to export the model and digest it for that game engine. So I'd have to make changes to the armature. I'd have to make all sorts of concessions, like I have to export to FBX, but I can't keep my vertex colors. And while there are being tools right now that are being developed to sort of lessen the membrane between creative products and game engines. Right now, game engines are pretty much solely the domain of developers, and 3D content creation suites like Blender and Maya and 3D Studio Max, these are all for creatives, and they're not kind of unified. Again, hence unified workflow. And this is usually the point where people say, yeah, but there's something called Godot, if you want to pronounce it the way that I read it. And yes, that's an open source game engine that doesn't actually charge me when I release a commercial project, but it's sponsoring a commercial world. What do I mean by that? Right now, games rely on platforms to play. I need to package this and then put it on a platform for people to access it and play it. And Godot is really wonderful at that, but it's supporting locked down content. What does that mean? Well, the assets, the files, the code in Godot, I could go online to Blender Market or TurboSquid or CG Trader, and I could buy, say, 100 3D models and digest them into the game and then just whip something up really fast. And then I can publish it. And while that's great in the short term, and maybe you could see that as, oh, I can make a game and, make money off of it or something, what I'm doing is I'm buying into a certain construct. And that construct says that you need to be in a world where you're protecting your intellectual property at all costs over something that people created. And a good example of that is with stock models and photos. These models cannot be redistributed. In fact, when you purchase most of them, they'll say a standard editorial license or a standard license, which is usually, okay, yes, you can buy this and you can package this into your product and then sell that product, but you can't redistribute the model the way that we're distributing it because we want to sell that model and make money. And while this seems nice because you're like, oh, I'm an artist and I sell 3D models and stock models, what that does mean is that it hurts the consumer or the person that plays a game. It hurts people that play games because they can't make changes to these models and they won't have access to them. They need to go back to the developer or the game studio, and the game studio will do usually very double-handed, backhanded sort of things like, oh, we changed the color of this and now you have to pay $5 for it. And while this is a nice way to make money, again, you're buying into a construct that ultimately hurts people. To think of it another way, think of like how in America and the world we're kind of entering late-stage capitalism, where capitalism has gotten so bad in America that it's actually eating its own people. So, for example, the healthcare industry, it's a for-profit industry, and because it needs to make profit, it makes people suffer by allowing certain people to fall through the cracks. And it does this so that it can make profit. So capitalism, it's okay as a way to motivate people to create products and do things, but at a certain point, it's like a snake that eats its own tail, right? It eventually starts eating the actual people that it's supposed to be serving. So capitalism right now is kind of eating Americans, or it's killing people, quite literally, because the healthcare industry needs to make profits, and this is destructive. Now, this is very similar, in a lot of ways, to the game industry, where it needs to make money, and it's eating itself. So instead of making games more fun, they're making free-to-pay games or software as a service, where they're essentially trying to lock down this information to make it more difficult for people that play games or want to access games so that they can continue to make profits. So one of the great ideas that Google has is Stadia, which I think is it's going to be fairly effective, but it's a very odious concept at its very core. They're essentially trying to make money off of people as a streaming service. So you don't own the game anymore, but you're being paid to re-access the game. And it's not as bad as everyone's saying, but it's also a very insidious thought, because you're allowing a commercial company to essentially own the game that you're supposed to be buying. It's not like a board game where you can play it. You have to keep rebuying the game. And they want this, and it's because they want to make money. My game, similarly, will be a game that you can buy and you can purchase, but you can make edits yourself, and it's very empowering and pro-consumer, because while you may be making concessions, my game will not be as graphically amazing as something made in Unreal or Unity. What it is doing is it's sponsoring an open environment. And I believe that people will be so sick of games being locked down and feeling so powerless with their products that they always have to be either online paying a membership fee or simply paying $60 every time they make an update or pre-purchasing things, that an open game will be something that people would much rather occupy that space than be forced to purchase a game and then play something that maybe is graphically more intense or impressive. And that is what I'm doing. I'm using a unified workflow that's the domain of artists, and a lot of people that will use Blender and appreciate editing and modeling things and being able to make changes will play this game, and they will feel empowered and they will feel better about playing this game, and it will allow people to sort of contextualize what they're doing, and it won't make me some sort of linchpin that will continually charge people. So it's going to be a place where people trust and feel empowered and inspired, and it's a better thing for artists. And that's really it. The unified workflow makes it powerful for artists. There's no contract that you need to sign. There's no Faustian deal that you're making with a game company that's concerned with market value. Unreal Engine is not open source. They've made their source code available for people, but they still charge you money when you want to make a commercial product. At the end of the day, you're beholden to their contract, and they can change the terms at any time. As an artist, a lot of artists you're basically beholden to speak truth to power. And when the canvas on which you paint is essentially being controlled by a contract that they can change at any time, you're sort of unable to do that. You're no longer creating art. You are creating something within their ecosystem. You are creating something like a product, and you're pushing their product, which is what they're very concerned with. They're concerned with market share. They want control over a market. They want everyone to be using their tool. But that, at the end of the day, can ultimately declaw an artist and also not make them make their ability to create their art. It will compromise at its core what you're doing, because it won't truly be authentic, but it will be sort of in the service of this platform. And that's basically what my game is not. It's the distillation of what I would call probably ethical capitalism. Ethical capitalism has been recently rebranded as democratic socialism, which is you can exist within a construct where you make money. So this game will be a commercial project that people can buy, or you can support me on Patreon. And by doing this, I'm empowering the people to use it. So my model, it's still a game and you can buy it, or you can support me and get it that way. But it is not at the expense of the user. It is not eating the consumer. It is not devaluing the consumer. It's not making the person that plays the game feel helpless and beholden to me. That doesn't mean I won't be making updates to the game or wanting to improve it, but I'm trying to create a space that people would rather occupy, because it's a better space where people can make their own changes or understand what's happening or not feel personally violated as a consumer, which is exactly what the game industry does. So anyway, I thank all my patrons for the continued support, and I will step down from the soapbox here and get back to work. Thank you all so much for your support, and I hope that this answers the question finally, once and for all, why I'm using the Blender game engine. Okay.
The shadows linger.